mobile. We have the ability to both attack and defend because of that mobility, and it can be quite cost effective when we're effective with our banelings.
Yeah.
But the downside to it, and I feel it, and I know anybody that plays at a level below mine feels it, is it's so damn fragile. You know, if your baneling control is just a little bit wrong, then you lose your whole baneling ball to tanks. If your zergling control is just a little bit wrong, then you lose all your links to marines. If your mutas fly over a turret, they all die. You know, and it's just, you know. So let me ask you. We've seen a little bit of roach stuff and of different unit compositions from some other players. I think it's getting a little bit more popular in Europe. I don't think it's really made its way over to the GSL yet. But what do you feel is the viability of these meteor builds that we're starting to see with roaches and dare I say hydras from time to time against a Terran player?
Well, let me say this. I think those builds and I think those army compositions absolutely have their place. But I feel like we can approach this with kind of a Brood War mentality in that I feel like the highest proficiency, the highest effective army composition is Muta-Baneling, Ling, and then transition to X. It can be Broodlords, it can be a Roach switch, it can be whatever. But I feel like with that mobility and the power of that build, you're able to best take on the Terran. However, and here's the caveats with that, this is not excluding the points you just made, which is that it's very fragile. Yeah. It's extremely fast-paced. It requires a lot of APM to be done well. It is not an attack move composition. You cannot. It's micro-intensive. It's decision-frigid. Like, I can feel your exhaustion at the end of these 2 hours of TVZ.
Yeah.
And it's not. That's not unique. That's not like your weakness. That's this matchup, man. And I'll tell you what. The more high level you get, the more it's like this. So my big point is like, those compositions are good, but I feel like they're less. They have less potential. Like if you open up roaches like Sen does every game, a guy can make marauders, tanks, and just crush it. If he made marines, it's not like he's at a deficit. He just makes a very gradual switch, and now he's crushing it.
Right.
Hydras, I feel like they do have a place in TVZ, but I think that it would be very similar to like PVZ, or excuse me, ZVP, where they're like a support unit to roaches. But then again, a guy sees that, switches to tanks with his marauders, and all of a sudden those are crushed.
Right.
Whereas if you're going Muta, Bane, Ling, there's nothing he can make that just crushes it. There is nothing.
Right.
There are things that are good against it and better against it, but there's nothing he can do that just crushes it.
Yeah,
so
not that hard counter unit comp.
Exactly. And that's why in that game against Avilo, where I really felt like you had the chance to beat Avilo, and he's a very good Terran, was when you switched to roaches and they were able to take those hardy marines. And his tank count was getting limited because you're excellent micro.
Yeah.
And again,
excellent.
It's no.
1A
no, you did a great job. That middle, you picked off a good 3 or 4 tanks one way damage. I thought it was fantastic. I feel like the stronger is to have that Hydra Warren or Hydra Den, and it's the Roach Warren. Have them upgraded in that late game where you're maxed out. Crush him. Have the big fight. If it's a wash, meaning you both lose your armies, reload with roaches and hydras.
Yeah.
They build faster than those ultralists. They move faster. They'll get there faster. And as long as you get into his production, he's a dead man.
Okay.
I mean, you moved out with ultralists that were never going to die, but they took too long to get there, and then they can't hit air, and they're not very mobile. So that was why that was part of the reason why you lost.
All right, man. Well, how about we go ahead and move on to some kind of Q&A? I'm
Let's
certainly too far out of gas to even fathom playing another game.
No, I can hear it. It's cool, man. That's why. Usually I'm a very intense and high-paced coach, but I could kind of hear, I could feel your exhaustion. So I was like, I'm not saying anything. This poor guy. It's like whipping a horse into the ground until it dies.
I tell you, dude, it's like, I don't know. So anyways, guys on stream, please email questions to that address. Any questions are welcome and stuff, but please, if you have a ZVT focused stuff, that would help. And yeah, so we'll just open up right away. It says in ZVT against a Terran player who doesn't open 2 racks and instead opts for a Hellion opening. What is your usual response? and we kind of segue. If we make preemptive roaches, the guy says he finds the mid game uncomfortable. So ZVT.
If he opens up roaches, or what is he saying?
Sorry, it's like a paragraph. But the question is, how do we respond to a Terran that instead of opening 2 racks opts for a Hellion opening? And he goes on to say that he doesn't like roaches because he's afraid of banshees.
Okay, well, it's an excellent question. That's actually a pretty good common fluidity in the matchup, and that is that you see that factory at the ramp, so your natural response is, okay, I think I heard roaches are the best, and they are. But here's the misconception. You don't open up roaches as your featured army unit. You open up as a defensive response to what the Terran is doing. So you make that roach warren. You make like literally 5 or 6 roaches, whatever is necessary to parlay, or not to parlay, that's the wrong word, but to deflect what they're doing. So if they make 25 Hellions, do you make 5 or 6 roaches and then blame the loss on me? No. You make 10, 15 roaches, but if he makes the standard like 4, 5, 6 Hellions and tries to run into your base, that's when you have those 5 or 6 roaches. But then you immediately transition into Lair, into Baneling Nest, into Baneling Speed, Inspire, and you just go right back onto track. I really like. I'm going to be a fairly man, I'm running out of words too. I'm going to be a one-dimensional coach on that because I really do feel like that's the best. So I'll be very interested, and I'll probably tune in if I can, to hear what Machine, Rhett, and there's other guys, even LZ Gamer has to say, because to me, Muta Baneling Ling is the best. Anything else you're doing is relying on an inferior response from them, or it's an inferior response from you. And of course, it can work, but if you were to do it out of 100 games, my argument is that it would work less than the Muta Baneling would.
Yeah. I seem to keep coming back to roaches in ZVT because, like, you saw it time and time again. My control is not pro gamer control by any means, and my my win rate reflects that because I try to do these mutiling things and I make mistakes, and little mistakes add up to be big setbacks. So I keep coming back to this roach play, and I like watching Damaga because he seems to like roach infester and the broodlord, and it seems to work for him, and he's pretty high level. But I mean, I don't know. It's a question for Damaga. I don't know.
Well, I would say a lot of his success with that composition is because nobody else does that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really seen very much, and especially Zergs in Europe, rather, are very rare. So the Terrans are getting less practice against it. He's doing something that less Zergs do, so it's extremely rare, and it probably has some success that way. But also, Damaga loses to a lot of Terrans. A lot of Terrans. In fact, you don't see him in too many finals.
Right.
He's, not to take away from success, he's obviously doing frickin' fantastic. He's one of the best Zergs on the planet. But I still feel like that composition relies on gimmick. I think his APM, his control, his skill would be better used mastering Muta Baneling Ling. And then, if he were to face a Terran in a best of 5, maybe 2 of the games he does that composition. The other thing, too, that I think gets underused, especially in these last games, and it's because there's so much to do in TV or ZVT, especially with Muta Ling Baneling, that infestors get forgotten. And it's because those units require babysitting as well.
Yeah.
They can't just be an attack move with your Lings and Banelings. They have to be very specifically used. So it's like literally you need high APM, and then you have to have like 4 or 5 keys for your armies to be really good at that composition. So there's a lot of people who would be like, it's too hard. And I'd be like, you know what? It probably is. But if you're practicing to be the best and you want to be the best, that's actually what you have to do, in my opinion.
Right. So let's kind of piggyback off of that answer and ask, when the Terran opens with this kind of 2 racks bio play that we've been talking about today, what do you think is a good time to pull out the infestors?
Late game. I feel like the Mutalist is your hammer, and it's kind of when you're getting close to like 170, 180 supply, make 4 or 5 infestors, and those are like your Templar. Those are the spellcasters.
Yeah. All right. So here's one just kind of for you off topic. What's your practice regimen like? How many hours a day should I or should these guys watching be practicing if they want to be a pro gamer level?
Well, I spend anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day in and around StarCraft 2, whether it be coaching for multiple hours. I average 6 hours a day, but I'm trying to trim it down to 4, and I will in February. Then the rest of that time is spent practicing. It's a question of how you want to quantify your time between the latter, custom games, or media, meaning streams, replays, or VODs. And I would say you want to spend the majority of your time in the ladder. That is the perfect replication of a competitive scenario where someone is trying to beat you at all costs because they want your points.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're doing training games, there's other ulterior motives going on.
Yeah.
So spend the majority of your time on that. I'd say like 50%. Then I'd say 25% custom games, working specifics out with friends that are either as good or better than you. And of course, that's a paradox because if everyone did that, then nobody would be playing someone worse than them. So of course, at some point, someone has to give in. But for the most part, you need to play, in that way, someone better or as good as you. And then the other 25%, when you're eating, when you're just hanging out, when you're tired, you play too many TVZs or ZVTs, excuse me, then watch a good stream. Watch a few replays that you downloaded, or probably the stream. I'd say that's the most commonplace, but replays are great too.
Yeah.
And that serves as expanding your thought process. Like, I can't tell you how many things I watched from a stream where I'm like, that's an interesting idea. Whether it be good or bad, it at least opens up that marketplace of ideas in my head, and it expands my understanding of the game one way or the other.
Cool. All right, here's a question about late game unit control. This guy says that I was losing a lot of units to bad rallies in the later stages of the game. And he suggests hotkeying his eggs after macroing up, like 5S, ZZ, ZZZ, and then shift 1 to add those recently morphed eggs to my control group. Are you familiar with this macro technique, and what do you think about it?
Actually, that's been discussed in several other sessions I've had. Whatever works for you. I'm kind of one of those guys, too, that, like, there are certain things that are cut and dry, just better than others. But if you have the control to hotkey your eggs, and it's not taking away from other aspects of the game, which I feel like do have a higher propensity for rewarding you, like, is hotkeying your eggs ever going to be the thing that Fruit Dealer attributes to his success? No. He's not going to get up and say, I just recently started hotkeying my eggs and now I win all my games.
Right.
It's not going to happen. But if you feel like you can do that and still control your army and macro appropriately, and that helps limit the amount of units you have rallied into bad places, then sure, go for it. I would not tell someone to not do that because it's stupid.
Yeah.
If it helps them, then do it.
Cool. I'll just go ahead and add that I've messed with that before, but nothing pisses me off worse than going to move my army and then getting a million little lines pointing that my eggs are rallied there, and that part alone turns me off on it. But
yep.
Here's one more question for you. What are your thoughts on drop tech with Mutabane? For example, trying to drop Banes on Marines to use that as a sort of incentive to make the Terran move?
I think that is the dividing line between good Zergs and great Zergs. I feel like, I literally, not to even be joking, but I feel your exhaustion. We crack the whip hard. Now imagine if throughout this whole thing I was barking at you to do more of that.
Yeah.
Because really, you have to do everything you just did, and then to be a great Zerg, you have to be constantly threatening that as well. And it's no surprise that earlier in this series, when you had more energy and more brain capacity because you weren't so tired, you did do that. Not as effectively as you wanted to, granted, but you did try it. You tried to Banling bust / bomb his tanks and Marines, and he moved the Marines back, and he didn't really have the energy to pursue them. And then as the series went on, that opportunity kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, that was our one long game, so it's not like it's entirely your fault. But that is something that I think every Zerg who's sitting here who gosh, I only have an hour or two to play this game, and I'm Zerg, and I'm just trying to find out how to play it more enjoyably, then probably don't worry too much about that. If you're looking to get a little bit better, work on the Mutabane Ling. If you're a high-level Zerg who's competitive, or you're not, and you want to be, then that's something you need to start earlier rather than later. Because as this game matures and grows, I can tell you right now, that is going to be one of the things that determines a great Zerg from a good Zerg. If not on their army, then mineral lines.
Yeah.
Big time. And also, just with Mr. Bitters, for the people that watch this session now or later, we started this whole thing off with a game against Avila where he could not attack the middle. He could not until the end. So it comes down to drop play. It comes down to Baneling busting as well as attacking at the same time because it just creates more targets. And that is what's going to allow you to win those close games like that.
Cool. All right. I guess I'm going to try to find one more good question for you, and then we'll let you wrap things up for us. Let's see if I can just pick a really good one. All right, here's one that I like asking pro gamers because every pro gamer has a different opinion on it. Do you have any tips for using Neural Parasite in any matchup, not just ZVT? And is the spell even worth a damn?
Okay, Neural Parasite is good. It's really good. But I, again,